And before we start any presentation at Royal Roads University, we always acknowledge the lands that we're on. So the campus is located on the traditional lands of the Cosepsum and the Lekwungen ancestors and families. And we're really grateful to be able to do the work that we do here every day. And many of us are working remotely from all sorts of locations right now. So just want to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that we're each on and really appreciate where we get to work from collectively. So with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and let Sharon start sharing her screen. So Andrea, perhaps if you could make Sharon a co-host, and we'll make sure she's able to queue up the slides there for us to start our session. So Sharon McMillan is our lab coordinator at the university, and we're really excited for her to take us through the session today. Sharon?
All right. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the program, and I'll answer some questions. We'll do the tour, and then I'll answer some more questions. So I'll kind of get started here. So I'm going to be going over all of the information for the Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science program. So this program has two delivery methods. We have a blended option or if you are on the on-campus program, that is your third and fourth year in a calendar year, so in 12 months. If you decide to do the blended option, this is your third and fourth year over a period of 2 years. But the nice thing with this option is that you can continue working while you are doing it. So it's basically a 3-week residency at the beginning, then you have online courses, a 3-week residency in the middle, and then online, and then a third residency. So basically you'll have 3 residencies throughout those 2 years. And most of our students will have done like some sort of technical project, and the blended has 2 other courses. So we have tools for business decision making and a public policy formulation. So those 2 courses make up the credits that the major project would have on the on-campus version. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the schedule. So for the on-campus option, you would arrive here in September. There's a little bit of kind of what we call foundations in September, and then you start your 4th quarter with start. Then from June to April, you would have your first distance portion. Then the next May, you would have your second residency. And then that June to April, you would have your second online portion. And then you would end during your third residency at the end of those 3 weeks. And then that would be the end of your program. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but this is all of the courses. So you'll notice that the major project says on campus only, and then the green one and then I colored the major project one blue, and this one can have all of those. It really depends on what major project you get, so it can be a mixture. So here's a couple of examples of our chemistry labs. So we'll send you out quite often to get water samples, and so a couple of the ones for that are alkalinity of streams and ponds. So you would go and collect a sample from one of the local streams or ponds, and then you would bring it back to the lab for testing. Same thing for the nitrate and phosphate. Again, you would go and collect water samples. actually in there. A few examples of the biology and microbiology labs are isolation and characterization of Staphylococcus and Streptomyces. We also do one where you do natural and induced transformation of prokaryotes. That's a really interesting one. And then we do one with DNA isolation and digestion, which is another one where it's really interesting. You get to run a gel so you can actually see the DNA. So we're going to talk a little bit about the major projects. So this is one of the ones that's just for the on-campus version of the program. So the major projects, they differ for each one due to the sponsor and the topics. So some of them include lab work, some of them include field work, some of them include both lab and field work depending on the project. Sometimes you'll have site visits, sometimes you'll be out doing surveys or online surveys, and sometimes you'll be doing interviews with maybe some experts in the field of what your topic is and more. So there's all sorts of different things depending on what one you end up with, because each project is very unique. So this is a small list of examples. We've had about 25 years of this program, and I would estimate probably about 8 projects per year. So that's over 200 projects that we've done. So there's a huge variety for all sorts of different organizations. So this is just a few. You can kind of have a quick look, but they vary a lot from reducing fleet vehicle emissions to we had one that they did a plan for Western painted turtles, native plant landscaping design. So they definitely vary a lot. So it's kind of interesting to just see kind of the variety. This is an example of some of our sponsors. So we've worked with lots of municipalities. Just to name a few, we've got City of Colwood, City of Langford, and City of Victoria. We also work a lot with nonprofits. The major project is a really good way for them to get some help with some projects that's not costly. So a few of the ones that we've worked with quite a bit is the Compost Education and Healing City Soils. We've had partnership with them for about 5 years, I think, in a row where we've done projects for them. So that's one that we've worked with quite a bit. Wildlife Soup, we've had a couple of projects for, and we have also an ongoing relationship right now with the Mary Lake Nature Sanctuary when we're helping them with some projects. There's also some schools, so Royal Roads actually sponsors some, so we do some right here on campus. And then we've also done some for some of the local elementary schools, as well as some of the other education institutions here. And then I would say maybe a little less common, but still occasionally we'll have industry actually sponsor some projects. So again, a huge variety of sponsors as well as projects. So that's sort of the very, very fast overview. I can answer any questions that you have about any of that kind of stuff, and then we can go and do the tour. So I don't know, Christy, if any came in the chat box.
Thanks, Sharon. I don't see any questions in the chat box quite yet, but thank you so much for giving us that quick primer of the BSc in Environmental Science program. Oh, I see one question here from Rachel. Are there opportunities for grad students to work or volunteer with the undergrads in the lab or field?
I haven't heard of any in the past. That doesn't mean that there isn't any. One of the other things that I didn't mention that we do that the undergrads get to volunteer with, but that potentially we can have the graduate students volunteer with as well, is we actually run a outreach program for schools. So each year we have about 8 elementary school classes that come. And they get to spend a full day here doing science experiments. We usually do some outside activities with them. And it's a really good way to like kind of expose the kids to some really fun science stuff. They really enjoy it. So that's one way that we have some volunteer opportunity potentially, not only for our students, but possibly for the graduate students. We do occasionally have graduate students in the lab doing some of their own research, but so far, the only way that we would have them directly involved with our students is if you were working somewhere that actually sponsored a program. So a couple of years ago, actually someone that worked at the Compost Education Center, she was here doing her master's, so she was sponsoring a project while she was doing her master's here. So there's that potential if you work somewhere that maybe you would want to sponsor a project.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. And one question we've received as well as how has all this worked during COVID-19? And all of our classes have been online for the past year. So if you can touch on what that has looked like a little bit and how we've translated that outside of the lab and such.
Yeah, definitely. So it's varied based on whether it was the blended group or the on-campus. So I'll speak to the on-campus first. So the on-campus, they started online and they're currently online. So they're basically what's happened is their first 3 semesters have been fully online. So they're completing all of their courses that don't really have lab or fieldwork. So what's going to happen is the plan is for them to be here on campus for 4th quarter. So we're actually getting ready for that right now. And they're going to be completing all of their lab and fieldwork basically in 4th quarter. So it's going to be kind of a condensed semester, but we're going to try and make sure that they get pretty much everything that they would normally get to experience, but just sort of like more condensed and less lecture time. So they have, instead of having like 1 afternoon a week of labs, you'll be in the lab like 2 or 3 afternoons and you'll have a lot less lecture time. So the plan is to have pretty much everything that they would normally have just in 1 semester instead of 4. For the residency group, again, we're doing all of the online courses kind of at the front of their program. And then hopefully next May, both groups that we currently have in the blended will get to come here for residency next May. And again, it'll be kind of a condensed thing where they'll have a lot more lab and field work and a lot less lecture during those 3 weeks to try and fit everything in.
Perfect, thank you. I know that's a big question, especially right now. We have a question here from Eli. Please explain about the laboratory equipment. I wonder, I know you overview that in the video a little bit. It might be a good idea if we show that first and then see if you have any other follow-up questions, Eli, or is there anything you think, Sharon, that would be good to overview at this time?
Yeah, we can do the video, and then if he has any specific questions or just sort of like what kind of equipment we have in general or what kind of equipment you use, you want to maybe see if you have a little bit more specific question after the video. It's maybe the easiest way.
Perfect. And then question here. So we'll do that video after and then we can circle back as well, Eli. But question here about if you can expand a little bit on the projects you've done with local organizations and what those might have looked like.
Yeah, so one of the things we can do too is maybe Christy can post a link to the blog. So there's a bunch of the projects that are featured that the students actually wrote blog articles about their projects. So if you want to have a look through there, you can kind of have a good look. Some of the ones that I've been involved with a little bit more. So one of the ones on campus that I helped supervise, we had students collecting baseline data for some of the creeks on campus. So they were doing like water quality monitoring. So they were doing like pH, connectivity, temperature, oxygen, all that kind of stuff. And then also the plan was to do trapping of some of the fish that were there to see what was there. So that one, they were trying to see what's on campus, you know, what can we do to help improve the conditions, you know, how things are changing over time. And then the one at Mary Lake was similar as well. They were collecting baseline data to see kind of like what's currently going on, what might change in the future. They have some like developments or something that are going on outside of the nature sanctuary. So they wanted baseline data to see if there would be changes once that sort of got put in place. So I'm actually an alumni of this program. So when I was here, we actually did a project looking at the options of what we can do with construction and demolition waste to see how we can divert that from the landfill. And so we actually went up island to a couple of places and over to Vancouver to actually interview people that were kind of dealing with that issue in those cities to sort of get some information from them. So yeah, so it varies a lot. That's just kind of a couple of options. But yeah, if you have a look at that blog, there's about, I think, 8 in there from not last year's group, but the year before. They had blog posts as one of their assignments.
Perfect, thank you. And I know, oh, there we go. Andrea has just posted the link to the blog. That may have been a private message to me, I'm not sure. Or it might have gone into the chat to everyone, but we'll have that blog for you to check out afterwards. For everyone to check out as well. There's tons of great resources in there if you want to get to know the school in general as well and a little bit more about the program. So it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, there's lots of articles on there too about like the research that some of the professors do. So if you're interested in kind of learning more about some of their areas of expertise, there's stuff in there too. And there's also like I've written articles in there about the kids program. And so there's lots of different stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So worth checking out. And at this time, I don't see any other questions for the moment. So I think we can probably move on to our virtual tour. And then after that, we'll have another time period for questions again. So our tour is about 8 minutes and 50 seconds long. So you know, and I'm really, really excited about it. Sharon wonderfully filmed this tour, which is a great way for us to translate an in-person tour to our new virtual world. And I'm actually an alumni of the university as well. And I got to do a bunch of my residency courses, not in the lab, but in this building as well. And it was really a reminder, since I haven't been on campus for a while, about how beautiful this building is as a whole. And we're really excited for you to check it out. So bear with me for a moment and I'll share my screen and get this video playing.
Hi, welcome to Royal Roads University. This is the Sherman Gen Building, and this is where our science labs are. So this building was originally built over 105 years ago for the Dunsmuirs as one of their stables, and then more recently for the military college it was turned into the Muse Building. Royal Roads University also used it as the Muse Building for a number of years, and then in the last few years a full renovation was completed, as well as an addition, which the science labs are on this side with the addition, and on this other side is the original building. So welcome to the Sherman Gen Building. Welcome to one of our teaching labs. So this teaching lab is used for our biology and our microbiology labs. So we've got the setup for all of the students on the benches. So we've got a nice big window so you have a bit of a view and some natural light while you're in here. And then on this other side we've got some fume hoods. Off of the teaching lab, we have a lab support room. This has our -86 freezer, a regular freezer, a fridge, and 2 incubators. So anytime that you are bringing in any samples for your biology or microbiology labs, this is where they will go. So there's a second little room off of this teaching lab, and it's the glassware storage. So we pretty much always have everything you need out to complete the labs, but if you ever needed something extra, you'll probably find it in this well-organized storage room. So the next lab is the prep lab. So this is the prep lab. This is where I get all of your stuff ready for all of your labs. So I spend quite a bit of time in here. So in here we've got an autoclave, the dishwashers. We've also got a distilled water machine, some biosafety cabinets. So you can have a look around. So one of the locations in here that the students do spend some time is in this little room. So this is our balance room. So anytime you need to weigh out any chemicals or anything for any of your labs, this is where you'll go. So we've got some balances on both sides. So whichever type of balance you need, they're here. In here, you'll also find the chemical storage. And this is the second teaching lab. So the second teaching lab is set up very similar to the previous teaching lab with all of the benches, and on the other opposite side, a couple more fume hoods. So this is just how we have them separated, one for chem and one for biology. We also have a second lab support room. So in this one, we've got a couple more fridges and freezers. So off of this second teaching lab, we've got a field storage room, and then we're going to head to the research labs. So these are our research labs. So this room here is where all of the prep gets done. And then we've got two separate rooms that house all of the equipment. So we've got one that's for inorganic and one that's organic. So this is a very busy spot. So a lot of the equipment that gets used regularly is in here. So we've got an XRF. We've got an AA, and then around this other side, we've got the ICP-MS. So in this one, we've got the GC as well as a lovely view of the forest. So a lot of the research that gets done in these research labs is looking at heavy metals in soils. So that's one of the common things that gets looked at in here. So that's the end of the lab tour. So we got to see both of our teaching labs, the prep lab and the research labs.
Perfect. And that is the end of that wonderful tour. So I'm just going to take a look at the chat box now, since I wasn't checking that out during the video. Thank you so much for the nice comments in there. Perfect. Thank you, Eli. And let us know if you have any follow-up questions around the equipment or anything like that. We'd be happy to answer them as well. But that was so great, Sharon. Thank you to you and everybody behind the scenes who made that happen. It's a really, really great tour of the lab.
Yeah, no problem. It's not the best quality over Zoom, but it was enough to be able to show people what the labs look like in here.
Yes, absolutely. And now is a great time if you have any other questions for today. Um, we would love to help you and answer your questions now. But Sharon, is there anything that you might want to touch on in addition that we haven't touched on yet that folks might want to know about doing lab work, field work on campus, anything like that?
Not really. One of the nice things with the campus here at Royal Roads is we can actually do a lot of field work right here. We don't have to go very far. So probably the course that you spend the most time out on campus would be the ecology course. So that one, you get kind of a full tour of the lab. The ecology professor takes you around to a lot of like trails, like up near the top and then down to like where the creeks and stuff are. And so it's a really nice way to get to know campus a little bit better. So that's a nice feature. The campus is gorgeous, so it's so nice to be out. So each lab has chairs for 24 people. We don't have that many people in here at once. The way that it works is however many people are in the class gets split in two, and then we have like a group A and a group B, so that we have smaller groups, and then we just have half of them in here at a time, and then they would be split kind of between both rooms or whatever. So there's always 2 lab instructors in here with that many people, so we probably would have a max of 24 in at once with 2 instructors. And another really nice thing about our labs is that, at least when I was in college, you were always working with a lab partner. And here you don't really work with a partner, you're expected to do everything on your own. So it's a really good way to make sure that you actually get to learn how to do everything, because you don't have one partner kind of taking over and maybe doing a lot of your lab work. So that's a really nice feature that everybody gets to do everything themselves. Other programs. So for the most part, it's only the Bachelor of Science and Environmental Science students right here. There are a couple of exceptions. So in recent years, the BBA program, so the Bachelor Business Administration, they have an ecology for business. I'm not sure if that's the technical course name or not, but basically their business students get to learn about ecology and how that relates to the world that they're going to be working in. And so I help out with their labs, so they do get to spend some time in the lab, and I also help with their field work as well. So they get to be in here a little bit. And then we get the occasional master students that are in here for some of their own research for their thesis. But for the most part, that's kind of it. Like railroads is, a little bit on the smaller side. And so we don't have a lot of environmental programs. So it's mostly just the undergrads environmental science group. We don't use any explosives. we use pretty non-toxic stuff. The only explosives we do is we do exploding gummy bears for our grade 5 classes. Yeah, so that would be the only thing, but they're not really explosive, but they look explosive.
Oh, love that question. Yeah, do you want to expand a little bit more on when you bring younger kids into the lab?
Yeah, so we've been doing it for, I don't know, probably about 20 years. We probably have about eight groups a year that come through. They range from kindergarten to grade 5, and we have a completely separate set of activities for each grade. And it's free for the teachers and the school. They just have to get here. So if they decide to come by bus, the bus might cost the school something, or if they do parent drivers, then it's a field trip that's completely free for them. And there's all sorts of activities. The kids love it. The first thing they usually do in the morning is we have like 5 stations set up, and they have like 8 minutes each one, and then they rotate. So you like spend 8 minutes, do one experiment, switch to the next one. So it's kind of like a fast moving, lots of like really quick, really neat experiments. One of the probably the most popular ones is elephant toothpaste. If you've not heard of that one, you can look it up on YouTube. There's definitely videos. So yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's a really good way for our students to get a little bit of volunteering in, do something a little bit different than their schoolwork. And then sometimes they'll actually discover that they really like working with kids, and maybe that's something something they want to do work-wise. But it's also just a really great way to get kids to start liking science. So since Mickey started doing this program, scientists apparently now makes the list for kindergartners of what they want to be when they grow up, and that was not the case. It was, you know, firefighter and police officer and stuff. So yeah, the kids love it. They get so excited. And we have like little mini lab coats for them, and like, yeah, it's so much fun.
A follow-up question on that. Are those organized by the schools on their own, or does Royal Roads organize them and promote them, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's all Royal Roads. It's just our little department. It's not Royal Roads as a whole. It's just sort of our school that does it. So we work a lot with one specific school, and that's the school that we started out doing it with. And then we sort of, the other ones will be maybe like, you know, staff's kids or whatever that get to come. So because there's only 8 classes a year, it's not necessarily open to all of the schools and all the districts because we just don't have the space and time. But we do try and work with a lot of different schools. So we have had a huge, like quite a few numbers of different schools and just different districts come. The other thing that we try and do is we try and follow like one kid through so that class gets to come multiple times, so that you're not just exposed to like one day of science. You actually get to come like maybe 5 or 6 times throughout your education. So we try and have the same class back multiple times as well. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
Okay, just looking at, but yeah, I feel like there's so many cool things that happen that nobody knows about, but are like just something that's very unique to Royal Roads and to your team. That's super neat. So question about, can you do lab classes on Zoom? How has that worked?
I have not tried to do, like, do you mean for the kids or for the adult students?
I think maybe just in general.
Yeah, so basically how it's worked this year for the undergrads is we tried to get some of the theory and stuff done first. So they had to like read through the lab procedure. I made videos for all of the labs. So sort of like, you know, that tour video where I like have everything set up and I walk through and show the whole procedure. So they watch the video. Then we do, I do office hours where they can ask questions. We do it like a lecture on the theory for them. And then there's some assignments that they had due ahead of time. So like introductions. And that was to get them ready for when they're here for 4th quarter to actually physically do the labs, because they'll be so busy when they're here for those 10 weeks that we're trying to like get some information and some assignments due ahead of time. So that's been spread out through the first 3 semesters, getting them ready for 4th semester. So they're like all ready to go. They know everything they need to know, and they're just ready to come in and do them. We've not tried any of the school groups on Zoom. I did have a couple of experiments set up to try with some of my nieces just to see how it would go online, but I've not actually had time to do it because that is something that might be kind of interesting. But we've been so busy with sort of adjusting to what we're doing at the moment that haven't had time to do a lot of extra. But that was something that we kind of talked about, was whether we would try to do something like that over Zoom. But I don't know if it would keep the kids' interests, right? Because they can't actually like touch and do things. So definitely wouldn't be a whole day thing. It would be maybe like half an hour or something where we could show them something. But yeah. I see there's a question about what else goes on in this building. So this building has the environmental science department as well as tourism. So there's lots of other students around in this building too. There's a bunch of classrooms upstairs. There's a couple of hangout areas. So there's like what they call the hub. There's lots of chairs and tables and stuff. And then there's a couple of other areas where there's seating. There's a couple of like little kitchenettes. So yeah, there's lots of other stuff goes on in here too. It's fairly busy. And yeah, so you notice that little cafe. And so the cafe is in here because this building is a little bit more separate than some of the others. So there's a full cafeteria sort of in the main part of campus. And then it's like, I don't know, maybe a 10-minute walk from those buildings over here. And so if you only have a short break, you can just quickly run in there to get a snack. So they don't actually do cooking and stuff in there. They just bring stuff over from the main cafeteria.
but it's really handy to have. And I think Sherman Gen probably has like the most open study space out of a lot of our buildings on campus. So there's areas for you to hunker down and study, or get together with a group to do group work and things like that. So there's a whole other part of the campus that wasn't captured, of this building that wasn't captured in the video. But yeah.
We weren't sure how it would look on film, try and go up and down the stairs. The stairs is really nice too. They did a really good job when they renovated. So yeah, there's lots of seating areas, especially in this building.
Yeah, and it's like floor to ceiling windows. It's quite beautiful.
It's definitely a nice spot.
Alrighty, so if any, I think we've asked all the questions that are in the chat box for now, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to ask away. And then one other question I wanted to ask as well is, I know we talked about this a little bit beforehand, Sharon, but say you're transferring into the BSc program from another college that doesn't do a lot of lab work or anything like that. It's not a big focus. Do you have any advice for those students to prepare or mentally prepare for getting into lab work once you're at Royal Roads?
Yeah, so your background definitely affects when you get here. So we know based on what program you came from, whether you'll be really strong in maybe the fieldwork side or really strong in the lab work. So, you know, we're expecting some people to get here and be maybe fairly beginner on the lab side, but maybe, you know, have a lot more experience in the field side. So, you know, we're not expecting you to come here as experts. You know, we have everything you need to kind of get started. I would say that if you're not super strong in chemistry or biology, that maybe you kind of study up a little bit, because those two foundations courses are meant to get you up to speed for the rest of the like third and fourth year courses. So if you didn't have a lot of one or the other in college, then you're going to find those courses just a little harder and a lot more work. So that's something that you can kind of get started on beforehand. I don't know that you can do much lab-wise without actually being in here, but the theory part definitely. And I think they still send out like a pre-workbook with just some information that you can just sort of some ideas of what you can study up on. So that sort of gives you an idea of some of the things that you might want to look over before you get here. But yeah, we know that depending on what program you did, that your knowledge and skills vary a lot, and you know we're prepared for that when you get here. So don't stress about it too
much. Perfect. Thanks for addressing my question that I think might be handy to some other folks too. And if you do have any questions after this about the program or anything else, we have a whole enrollment team who is here to help. So I'm wondering, Andrea or Yuhan, if you could actually pop in the email addresses to both our domestic and international enrollment teams, but feel free to reach out anytime with any follow-up questions that you have. So Sharon, before we head off today, is there any other final words you want to share or anything we might have missed that you want to touch on?
Not specifically. Maybe just that this is a really interesting program. It's, you know, with the list of courses that I had up, like it's very diverse. You kind of learn a little bit about lots of things. It's a very well-respected program. We hear from employers that they really like the grads coming out of this program. It's difficult and it's a busy program, but it's well worth it. It's been a few years since I completed it, but it is a really interesting, it's a really good program. So if you're considering it, look into it a little bit more, you know, ask questions if you have any questions about the program, but it's a really great way to get your degree if you've done some college already.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sharon, for taking us through the tour and answering all of the wonderful questions in the chat box today. And thank you to our team behind the scenes, Andrea, Yuhan. I can see Christelle and Lauren from the School of Environment also joined us today, so thank you. And with that, we will break for the day. Thanks again to everyone who joined us. And in 15 minutes, we'll be back. So you're welcome to stick around in this room, take a little break, stretch your legs, and then we'll be on to the next session. Thanks again.